Volusia County tax deed sale. So today's episode is all about Volusia County tax deed sales. Now, when I say tax deed sales, that's the actual title that the county has, but it's really an auction, and the property will go to the highest bidder. Now, everyone is treated equally at the auction. However, not everyone has read the auction rules or knows what they're doing. And you'll see how painful this can be in just a few minutes. But before I go further, Volusia County tax deed sales are really auctions which are held anytime online, but they also hold them on the courthouse steps. Anybody can attend the auction. The only requirement is that you have money if you do bid. Now, my name is Ted Thomas. I've been involved in tax lien certificates and tax defaulted property for more than 30 years as an investor and as a teacher and a guide. We're going to talk about some concepts today that are a little on the confusing side, but stay with it and let's see if we can nail it down for you. We're going to talk about the Volusia County tax deed sale, which, as I said, it's really going to be an auction. Now, in over 3,000 plus counties across the United States, the government will need money to pay the county employees. They're also going to need money to pay for the police department, the fire department. They need to pay the schools and the school teachers. You're getting the idea. So the county has a lot of bills to pay, not only the county employees, but hospitals they help out with and libraries. Well, where does that money come from? It all comes from property taxes. So the counties have to collect property tax. So if an owner fails to pay property tax, what happens? Well, the county's going to issue some default notices right away, and they're going to do that by using what's called a due process of law. That means they're going to issue notices telling the property owner they're in delinquency, and if they don't do something, the county will have consequences. So here's how all that works. The county is authorized by the legislature and the Board of Supervisors, county commissioners who run the local county. They're authorized to seize property, to confiscate property for non-payment of property tax. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people don't pay their property tax. And when that happens, the county will take action. So the county tax collector and the county commissioners and so on, they're all going to get together and they're going to mandate that the treasurer confiscate the property and then sell it. And when they sell it, they usually sell it for the back taxes. In other words, they're not trying to make a profit. They sell it for very close to the back taxes. Maybe they put some fees on top of that. So those properties are going to be sold to the highest bidder at auction. Now, that auction in Volusia County is called the Volusia County tax deed sale. It's really an auction, and the property will go to the highest bidder. Now, the auctions are posted on the county website, and you can also find them in the local newspapers. All right, now anyone can attend the auction. The only thing they're going to ask you to do is be sure that you have money before you bid. Now, the bidding can start on the courthouse steps, or sometimes it's online. The online auctions go a little slower than the one on the courthouse steps. Now, the counties that have small populations, there's only going to be a few properties, a dozen properties, maybe 2 dozen. I've seen up to 100 in a small county. All right, but the big population counties, in other words, where they got a lot of people, there's going to be hundreds of properties that are going to be auctioned. Now, remember, Volusia County calling it a tax deed sale. A lot of counties in Florida will call them tax deed sales, really auctions to the highest bidder. All right, so nationwide, you can plan on millions of properties being available at these tax deed sales and at this, what I call the tax deed auction. Now, Volusia County is a small population county, so their auctions will just have dozens, and they do them on the courthouse steps, as I mentioned, and people attend on a regular basis. So Florida requires 2 auctions in Florida. 2 auctions before the delinquent property is lost by the owner. Now, the first auction is a tax lien certificate auction. Now, a tax lien certificate auction is altogether different than the Volusia County tax deed. Tax deed means you're going to get the property, but you need to understand the tax lien certificate auction first, because if the tax lien auction takes place and the people don't pay, well, then there's a real challenge, and this is how they solve it. So what happens with a tax lien certificate? Anybody can go to that auction. There'll be hundreds, there'll be thousands of tax lien certificates in every county in Florida. They want to sell the certificate because it's the same problem. The county needs money. They use that tax money. So what they do, they sell a certificate, get the money from an investor, and then they put the money to work paying county employees. All right, now we're going to pay the investor back. Well, they have a tax lien auction, And when the people come in and pay, which 95, 97% of the people will come in and pay their tax, now they can pay the investor back and the tax lien certificate disappears. But what happens if they don't pay the certificate? All right, so many people raise their hand and they buy a tax lien certificate. Why? Because number one, it's safe and secure. And what's it secured by? It's secured by the property. All right, so people like secure investments. So they bought a tax lien certificate for security. So what happens if the people don't pay? Well, in all the other states, if the people don't pay the tax certificate, the tax lien certificate buyer ends up with the property. In Florida, it's not that way. In Florida, if the 2-year expiration goes by and the people haven't paid the tax lien certificate, the person that owns the certificate needs to petition, needs to request the county have another sale and sell the property at auction. Now, when they sell it at auction, they're going to sell it probably for a higher price than what is already due. So if they sell it for a higher price, then the money comes in and they pay off the tax lien certificate holder. Well, that really makes them happy because they not only get 100% return of their money, they like that, plus they get all the accrued interest, and maybe there's even some penalties involved. All right, so let's go through this process and kind of learn what's really going on. So a tax lien certificate buyer is only buying a piece of paper. That's all they get. However, someone going to the Volusia County tax deed sale, they're going to end up with a property. Okay, because that's an auction where you end up with a property. So it's much different than a tax lien certificate sale. Now, the safety conscious people want tax lien certificates. All right, now the property owner stays on the property for the whole time a tax lien certificate is in effect. In other words, if they go into default, the county, the government doesn't push them off the property. The person that buys the tax lien certificate has no right to that property, has no right. They can't go on the property. They can't talk to the owner. They need to leave the owner alone. All right, that owner is protected and allowed to stay in that property for up to 2 years. However, at the end of 2 years, there's going to be another auction. And that's what you need to know. So there's a 2-year period if you own a tax lien certificate. But experience shows 95, 97% of the people will come in before the 2 years. They'll pay the tax. They'll pay the interest that's due. They'll pay any penalties. So you'll be out long before the 2 years. However, some properties will not ever pay. And in Florida, the person that bought the tax lien certificate will not get the property until another auction takes place. So if you're getting what I'm talking about here, what I'm talking about is there's 2 auctions in the state of Florida. All right, now the buyer that bought the certificate, tax lien certificate, they like it because they want security. The buyer that goes to the Volusia County tax deed sale, what do they want? They want to get the property, and they want to get the property without a mortgage, and they want to get it without a deed of trust, which the county will make sure that happens if they have the second auction. All right, now my experience has taught me the successful people, what they do is they've learned how to do this from a coach or a guide or someone that knows how to do it. I found out early in life that if I asked people that knew what they were doing and I followed along with their advice, I did a lot better than trying to do things on my own. So for sure, if you're going to get in a business like this, it can be intimidating at first, and there can be some tough decisions. So what do you want to do? You want to get some successful people to help you out. You don't want to buy a property unless you have boots on the ground. I don't know what could happen to a property, and neither do you. So what if there was a chicken farm or a pig farm next door? What if there was a fire? What if there was a hurricane that took place? You don't know. So you must look at the property. So you have to have boots on the ground, preferably just before you buy it. All right, the second thing that people make big mistakes on is they don't go look at the property, figure out what the comparables are in the area are. They don't know the condition. They don't know what they can sell it for. Well, how can you bid if you don't know what you're going to sell it for? So you don't want to get involved in a property just by hoping and praying. Now, praying is not a good business strategy. I'm Ted Thomas. I'll see you in the next video.